Hello everybody, and welcome to a new conversation of the Altering Shifting Communing series, which is a project presented and hosted by Co-curator. I am Ilaria Kunti, the curator of the series, and as many of you know by now, this is a conversation series that started earlier on this year to provide a platform to practices of curatorship and knowledge sharing that we think critically, ethically, and decolonially their role. So every other Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Berlin time, we host a conversation with practitioners, projects, or independent spaces from diverse geopolitical, cultural, and social contexts. And in doing so, we try to uh, take a distance and steer away from mainstream mechanisms of thinking and curating. And we try to bring into this virtual space practices that are rooted in process, in research, that rethink what we do in communal terms, and that foster ethical relationships with publics, artists, and civil society at large. So in doing so, we want to address how projects can bring about the radical changes that we want to see happen in our professional field. So today I'm very, very happy to welcome Maya Juracán, who is a curator and activist based in Guatemala. Hola, Maya. Thank you for being here today.
Hola, how are everybody?
I hope everybody's doing fine. We will hear from people in a little bit. So just to resume, as always, we will have a 40-minute conversation, and I encourage everybody who's watching to ask a question through the comment section on YouTube and Facebook. And for those who have ideas or feedback that you want to share as you're watching, then please feel free to email us at this email address, which I always tend to share at the beginning of a conversation. So without further ado, Maya, welcome again. Thanks again for being here. You know that the very first question that I ask in this series is one that roots whatever will be said during the next hour in our personal existence and in a personal dimension, I would say, rather than just a professional one. So it is an important question to me. And that is, how are you? Where are you? And how have these past months been?
Well, hi everyone. Thank you, Iliara, for inviting me over here. I'm really excited. I'm in Guatemala. The tourists call it like eternal spring place. And it's true. We always have flowers. We always have sun over here. It's rain a lot too, but it's really green all the time. But it's also really dangerous and really hard to live in here. Like living in Guatemala is an act of resistance. That's why I'm an activist first, and then I'm a curator. So I think it's really been weird this couple of months, of these 6 months for the world. But here in Guatemala, the hospital network, it doesn't work like a long time ago. Like we have one bed for every 10 people in the hospitals over here, one bed for every 10 people. So you can imagine what happened with the pandemic. You can imagine that it's really hard. Like if you get sick, it probably is going to be a hard life. So we closed the country. Like once the president said the country is going to be closed, but that doesn't exist for all the Guatemalan people. Because your social status cannot permit you to close the country. It doesn't go to work because a lot of people work by day, so they win money by day for his family. So it's really hard about that. But it was really interesting for me in the art place because when the galleries closed, the museum closed, and everybody asking, "No, what we're going to do right now?" And the curator was like, "Oh, what's a curator without a museum?" And for me, that was really cool because I always answered that question like we have no four walls anymore. We can do whatever we want in whatever we place we think in. So for me, the possibility expands in my field, but that possibility is also thinking about what can I do with activism? What is the public space in the web? So that was what I'm thinking in this place of eternal spring.
Thank you, Maya. So then, continuing on this dimension of Guatemala as a context for your practice, I wanted to mention, we discussed this while prepping for the talk, I wanted to mention that today is October 20th, and it is an important day in Guatemala's history. And I'm glad that we managed somehow to time our conversation in relation to this. So I wanted to ask you, for those who might not be familiar with the Guatemalan context, whether you could explain to us briefly what it is today's date.
Well, it's 20th of October, the day of the revolution in 44 in Guatemala. We have a little revolution that called the Spring Revolutionary Act, I think, and it was so cool because it was. I think that we are a really colonist country in our mind and in our thinking, in our process, and the government is still a colonialist. We don't have a country. I think I always say we have a farm, and the people that have powerful money, they are have slaves, not workers. So the revolutionary, what happened, a lot of things like a teacher we calls Maria Chinchilla was killed, members of the press were killed too, and we felt like in that time that it's enough. For it's enough. We have to make a revolution. And then everybody come to the street, and even the army turns against the government, and everybody said, but like the woman were in the street too, and they were saying like, we want a revolution, we need right. So everybody goes out, and we strike. We say to the president, it was Jorge Ubico, yes, go out, and he renounced and go out. And then everybody's screaming like, "Viva la revolución! It's the time of the revolution." So it gives me goosebumps already because I'm thinking about that. It doesn't take long because a few years later, it was a conspiracy called PBS Success from the CIA, United States, that take out the country again, saying that our revolutionary government, it was Jacobo Arbenz, where it was a communist. So we have to take. They kicked them off of the government, and they send them to Mexico. But I like to think about this moment like a little utopic, like, oh, I always think like I'm a really dreamer person, but I am an activist, and I'm in art, so of course I'm gonna believe in utopic, but I believe in little victories, like this was a little victory that makes me believe in a little topic. And if people do it before, we can do it. We also can do it, and we also have to believe in it. So for me, that is really, really important. And everybody calls me like a troublemaker. So when they say that 20th of October is a revolution, I feel like it's my birthday. So I'm so excited.
So thank you for this, Maya, and in a certain way, then happy birthday, and thank you for sharing this with us. You mentioned the word activist, which is also what we used to describe you and so on, and it is an important element that you mention over and over again, and that is that you come from an activist background, right, rather than a curatorial one. So I wanted to start talking about curatorship with you by asking you if you could tell us a little bit about your path and how you started working with curatorship, coming from such an activist background.
I'm okay. Do you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay.
So sometimes it's going to glitch and jump, but we will be patient. No worries. It's just going to freeze for a couple of seconds. We will continue right afterwards.
Yeah. Well, this is really important to me because if you can put the slides, you can put the first
Sure.
one, the Diego Rivera one.
Let me pull it up.
Okay, so this is really important to me because I come from the history field. The second one, like if you can put it on, because I come from the history field and I was a teacher for almost 9 years. I'm a social study teacher and history teacher. And I just realized the history of the revolution, it doesn't tell, the textbooks doesn't tell it. Because of course, what do you want to kids and old people know about you can be a revolutionary? Do the people before you can do it. So it doesn't tell. And then I walk out into a museum and I see this piece of work that is a Diego Rivera artwork called La Gloriosa Victoria, the glorious victory. And I saw it and I think I'm like, oh, this is the piece of the history that the textbook it doesn't tell. And this one is when the President Eisenhower, the CIA, and the history of the Contra-Revolution, the Against Revolution, are telling when the revolutionary governments go out. So I see that this piece of art, and I said, we have it all. Like this can create a critical thinking. So I take this piece of art to my students, and they say, "Oh, I understand." Now it's like the bomb with the face with Eisenhower is because United States were bombing us, and all the bananas is because the United Fruit Company take our land, and all the people are slaves. And you see the flag of Guatemala in the jail. So everything was built about this content that I want to tell. So I feel like, well, this is my jam. This is definitely my jam, like telling the history with art, or in telling my social disagreement and what I think about this country with art. So I start to thinking about that. Then I study art in Spain, and then I study art New York Foundation of Art. And then I realized when I came to Guatemala, I don't feel comfortable in any spaces because the history was told in such aspirational way. In the galleries, in the museums, what's so aspirational, like we want to build art for others, not for our. So I found the House of Memory in Guatemala, that it was a place to tell the history of Guatemala. But I started to engaging with them, and I start to realize more and more about the history and more about the war. We live in a country that has a genocide, but the 50% of the population doesn't believe it was a genocide. So I started working with them, and I learned so much for the voices of the victims, not for the voices of the people who are talking about war, not for the textbooks, not for the social investigation about it. I was talking for the population that was involved in genocide, and I realized that is what I'm going to do. That is what my heart was set up and doing, because I think that the history of my country is a love story who has a lot of broken heart and broken bones. So that's why my curatorial practice is built around the reconstruction of social fabric. Mm-hmm. And I use art for that.
Thank you so much for this. So, should I take it off, or do you want it here, Maya?
Yeah, you can take it off, and then we can put it again.
We can come back to it. So, thank you. I think that this starts to give a very good idea of sort of the values and the framework of the work that you're doing. And so, continuing this conversation, right, about the context, Guatemala, as you were saying, it is a country with a very complex history. It is a country that has a colonial history that is still very much alive and evolving in a way. And so I wanted to ask you if you could talk to us a little bit more about the specificities, right, of the country and the context in which you work, in terms of culture, but also in terms of contemporary art and their relation to society. So the role that culture and contemporary practices have in society in Guatemala nowadays. And the other thing is, if you could talk to us a little bit further about how you have decided to address these specificities through your practice. And then we can jump whenever you want into practical examples or any project you would like to share with us.
Okay, so I am a grandchild of genocide. Like my father's lived, and that was, it happened to a lot of us. But then I grew up in this place in Guatemala that the art were in the street. Like I saw a Regina Jose Galindo, that maybe you will know it, like hanging up in the building, and then I saw her like walk and put a footprint of blood, and I say like, what would she thinking? You know what? I see a Jorge Leon, that was another artist, like sewing her lips, and I was like, we are so visceral. Like when I go to Spain, I see the piece of work and they were, oh, so pretty, so cool. And they asked me like, tell me about the piece of work in your country. And I was like, oh yeah, people just build with blood. And because why we keep talking about war? Because the wound is not healed. You know, because people doesn't recognize that we are hurt. So that the artist used the piece of art, the work, to tell that history. And we don't have a great schools of art, so they use his body. They use her, Regina Jose Lindo used her body to tell the history of a broken country. And for that, when I have been invited to create the Bienal of Arte Paiz, if you want to put the slide, it's the second one.
Sure.
I realized that I have only one chance to put my voice out there as a curator who use the memory, the historical memory, and I put it over here because the social complainant for this vinyl. So I curated with Gerardo Mosquera and Laura Wellen, and they have this amazing background, and I always thought that I have only one chance to create this vinyl in my country, because I will never be a creator again, because that will happen. You can never be a creator again if the Bienal of Arte Paiz. So I said I have only one chance. And for me, was thinking about how can make these pieces to think about the reality of the country we are living. So in one time, Gerardo and the other creator were saying to me like, no, people won't understand. And I was getting so mad and so red that I stood up and I say, so what am I? I'm a resistant creator, and I'm creator resisting everything. And they start to laughing and say, yeah, you are so get on this. So we were walking in the street one day, and Gerardo saw these billboards of people that was disappearing and killing during war. And he said, what is that? And I said, this is a colectivo that called Hijos. And they put in all of the street these pictures. And he said, what about it if we invite them to the vinyl? So we did, but we given a whole gallery for them. So they put from the bottom to the top these pictures of people who was involved in genocide, was dead or disappeared. And it was so important to me, this, because people just getting into this gallery and saw all the faces and all the eyes and all the brothers and the sister and the collective called hijos. That means that they are the sons and the daughter of people who were disappearing, killed during war. So even high class people that were involved in this getting into this gallery and say, oh no, it's not a genocide, like it kills a lot of people, but it was not a genocide. If for me that was so important, because it doesn't matter how you see the truth, it matters how political you stand up for it. So that piece of work and being in a gallery, being in a biennale, tells a lot of history. And then we put in the other picture, you see a piece of art of Brian Castro. And the first one, he put the page of the biennale, and you can restructure everything. You can change the names of the creators, so people imagine a lot of things, and you can put your name as an artist, and it was really fun to use it. But the second one was a piece called Tekun Uman, and you put a QR code in your cell phone, and then appears a video that is a social defender of territory, and a community defender of a territory, and she was speaking about the disappearing and the killings in 2019. So for me, that two pieces of work engaging together and say, yeah, you kill a lot of people, but it's still happening. That it never stopped. Realize that the violence and the disappearing for community defenders is still happen. And when we talk about indigenous art, people just call them like naive art or popular art. For me, that is the history of art being racist, because I don't come to your country and say, oh, the Van Gogh is a naive art, it's like, for me, it's like that. But everybody, when they talk about indigenous art, they say like, oh, so beautiful, because they are talking about his territory. But for me, like, if you want to talk about indigenous art, talk about the racist, about the political persecution, talk about when being robbed about the territory. So for being equal, we don't want like only put indigenous people in the museum, that it be inclusive. We want insurrection, that people recognize all the violence that the people were having in this moment.
Thank you for this. I really love this shift from inclusivity to insurrection. We might come back to it in a moment. So here we go. We're back. So diving a little bit deeper, while preparing for the talk, we discussed many elements that are somehow central to your practice. But among these, the one that really seems to be the spinal cord somehow of your curatorial vision is the notion of curadoria comunitaria, or communal or community-based curatorship, as a methodology through which to break hegemonic dynamics and build effective networks. So I wanted to ask you, where does this notion come from? And also, how has it emerged in your practice over time?
Oh. Well, in the Bienal of Art, 21 Bienal de Arte Paiz, I realized that I don't like the position of as a curator, because it was a position of power, that you can say what is good, what is bad, you can say who is in or who isn't. So I realized that I want to use my position as a curator to build engaging community relationship. So I discovered the feminist community feminist that is involved for the indigenous woman. So I realized that I can match with that, And then I learned about my discussion in curatorial approximation. It was really reductionist. So I say, if we have more voices talking at the same time, it will be more greater, it will be more natural. So I talked to my friend, do we do activism together? And I say, what about we make a biennale? And she say, like, no, what do you want to make a vinyl for? Like, do you want drink wine and talk about art as you think you know everything? And I will, no, because our vinyl is going to be a vinyl in resistance. And he say, okay, tell me more. So we created this space that called vinyl in resistance, that it was apologetic, I think, and with this troublemaker, that we want to make a platform for all these artists to talk about social engagement, political engagement, and and put it out there. So the first time we think, oh, but nobody's going to be a creator, because he was like, no, the creator is so annoying, I don't like them. So okay, so how can we do this? So we invited activists of the community, LGBT community, activists, indigenous activists. We invited social investigators, of communication investigators, and we all together formed what we call curatorial committee. So it was really interesting, because we trying to find out this narrative that we are going to use, and we came out with telling the other history.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really important for us, because it broke the hegemony, because we are not interested about telling the history of big artists, big men artists, big men white artists who's talking about other places. We are interested in talking about us. If you can put the slide, we can talk about more about it. So the biennale resistance, it was really fun, because we have the artist working with another artist to make these pieces happen. Because you talk about a vinyl and you say, oh, okay, they have a lot of money. We didn't, but we have a lot of thinking and we have a lot of saying. So we work all together to put this on. So we have this in all the work of art happen in the street, because we don't have a gallery. So that was so amazing too. We have this piece of work with two girls. We have here in Guatemala these preachers in the street that is always preaching about God in the street with a headphones, I think, no, with a speakerphone, and
Yes,
they
with a loudspeaker.
With a loudspeaker, and they were screaming that God is over here. But also we have a lot of men who harassment women. So they if you come to Guatemala, it's going to happen to you. It doesn't matter who you are. Men gonna speak to you either you want to or not. So these girls, Jasmine and Elda Figueroa, they hire actor that were screaming in the street like, God will save you, mamacita rica. And people were like, what happened over here? But nobody like shut him up. Nobody shut him up. And that was really interesting for us, like discover this situation. And then we have another pieces of Alejandra Garavito. His grandmother was disappearing during war, and she decided she was disappeared for the trajectory from his house to another place, and she decided to make a performance like walking for a whole day to this place, and it was so heartbreaking, like seeing her with his body building in his mind the absence of her grandmother and walking to the street. She walked for a whole day. And for one time we say to her, like, it's done, the piece is done. And she see us and say, it's not done. It's not about the piece. It's about the healing process. So that is the amazing things about the binary resistant, a lot of work. Esvin Alarcón Lam is also saying that what space public art means. So we have these murals, and he take them off and make these dancing and choreography around it, and everybody is dancing with the shells that were in the mural. So he taken off. And Lucia Rosales, we'd say she has a really strong discussion about a statement about if the memorial history doesn't talk about woman, there is not memorial history. This is a man history. So as a daughter of people that were fighting in the war, of a woman that were fighting in the war, she has a really strong statement, and he put I don't know how to say it, carbon,
like charcoal
in her feet, and to say that I have to do this because it's really hard for a woman to put a footprint in the history. So it was a really cool performance. But the greatest thing about the biennale, you can put that another slide. The greatest thing about the biennale for me is the community, the affection exercise we create for all. Like in this time in the whole biennale, I have my broken foot. Like you can, my left broken foot. So it was so amazing how I get into the spaces with muletas. I don't know how.
Yeah, like you had support,
like support.
Walking sticks.
Yeah, and everybody just helped me, and everybody just helping everybody to build his piece of work. So for me, I believe that it never going to disappear, this biennale, because it not belong to us. It belongs to everybody who wants to communicate it, who need this to say a strong statement about the political situation in our country, and not only about art. So the struggle is always going to happen. And we have this saying in this biennale where we say, okay, we are holding together our hands, and we never going to let it go. So that is really important to us. That is the community. We are not interested into build in the community. You know, when you say, I'm an artist that built in the community, for me that doesn't resonate. For me is to make a community, because that means that we are part of a community, that we're going to struggle with the stuff, not only create art and think we are amazing. No, we are going to struggle with the people who are struggling. So that is that we call curaduría comunitaria.
Thank you for this. And I guess that my next question would have been about Bienal Resistencia, but you already got there. So unless you want to show us the little video you had prepared for us right now, but I wanted to, you can tell me how to go about this, whether you want to chat a little bit further about Bienal Resistencia or we move on. What I definitely wanted to mention, because it came up in the conversation we had while preparing for the conversation, and it resonated with me enormously, is this thing that you said, and I quote, "I do not want to respond to the aspirations of the art world," which for me, that's it. This is the definitive statement, because it encompasses what you were saying about curatorship as a system of power, which I I feel super strongly about. And it's really about this notion of the aura, the bubble, as you call it, that really is not something to engage with, but to defy by going past it somehow, no? Like, is the famous resistance through re-existence. You just go past, you do your own thing. So I wanted to ask you to talk to us a little bit more about this notion of not engaging with the aspirations of the art world, of situating your work somewhere else, as you were saying, in the communities that you shape, through the work that has no authorship, like defying also this system of calling things by the names of the makers, and instead just being one big network. Is you become the social tissue through the project, and there's no more distinction, as you were saying before, between art and activism, because why should there be? And I agree with you in that. So I just wanted to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about this notion of just pushing back toward the aspirations of the art world and setting your own aspirations, setting your own ground for the conversations and the kind of social fabric that you want to create.
Well, I'm going to try to explain it because for me, I see this amazing piece of art, and people were talking about this piece of art like, oh, there is Aníbal López, like we said, like it's amazing piece of art in changing the history, and then I realized, and I took my eyes to the resistant population, the victims, and I said, do you know about this piece of art? They say, no, we never hear about it. And frankly, it's cool, but it doesn't make a lot of us. So I thinking about that, like it has to be another way to show this. Like in Spanish, I use the word a lot of acuerpar, that the art we do is like taking care of the social demandings, taking care of being companions for the people that are in a revolution, standing in the revolution. So for me, the calling of art is aspirational at himself, because it would build for occidentalization, because it was built for white men, it was built for that. So that all the narrative we talk about Van Gogh, Picasso, and everything, and for me it's not like that. For me, art is a social event. It's what it taking care about what the artist is thinking, what the artist is feeling, what the artist is around it, how the artist understand one place. And in that definition, social event can be social community events too. When the community go to make a market, a community market, that is a social event. How we communicate for each other is a social event, because we call a lot of artesanías, or I don't know how to say it in English,
sort of
art craft.
Yeah, art craft.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
we call art craft because it comes for a community environment. You say, I buy this art craft, but for me, it's a lot of things. It's a lot of things, and when I think about art, I think in all this great world of possibilities, of we can change things, we can understand, and to put it inside a white cube and put a little text and put just a piece of work as an object, I was thinking like, nah, that doesn't resonate for me. And that it come for a lot of conversation with I have with the linguistic Nanaxi and Diego Ventura, who he is a Quiche curator, that we're thinking about the word art in indigenous language. It doesn't exist. So for me, that is like I found that out, and I was like, yeah, that is how I'm feeling. But it exists, the word that it means the one who makes el hacedor, the one who makes lyrics, the one who make art, the one who make food, the one who make like all this kind of stuff. And then it exists in Cachiquel the word ush, that means a spirit of the objects. So the and nush together, it makes like the one who makes, the one who gives spirit to the object. And for me, that was so beautiful, and so and so much accurate the things I believe to. And it was not categorizing. You know how Occidentally thinking was to categorize. So you're indigenous, and you are this, and you are that, and you're this, and this is performers. For me, it's not like that. For me, it's for thinking about the possibility of the art, of the work that people are doing. So, and it's really weird to me, like a history of art, that when I get into a museum, I see all these objects the Metropolitan Art Museum of New York. When I get into that, I see all these Mayan objects, an Egyptian object, and they are presenting like a piece of art. But if you come over here, like white people still being colonialist with the indigenous people. So don't tell me about it that in the museum you had one name, and in the real life you being a racist. So for me, it was the importance of thinking about art as a social event than just a piece of work showing in a museum or a gallery.
Yes. And I think that this kind of takes us on to the next question. We already have a few questions and we have 20 minutes left. So I'll ask the next question. We'll try to be quick so as to give time also to answer the questions that are coming in. And I thank those who have asked already, and I encourage everybody else to start asking because we have 1 or 2 questions left before getting to the Q&A part. So you were talking about this element, which was right at the center of my next question, like how for you it is, like one of the elements of your practice is this criticism toward art history somehow as a central motivation of curatorship. And you advocate, as you just said, for a shift of focus from, let's say, art historical events, art historical occurrences to social and political achievements and events, right, as the core of what we should care about in this process. And so in this framework, I wanted to ask you about the Proyecto Maya Transfronterizo, so the cross-border Maya project, which is a very strong project that relies on these notions of horizontality that you just discussed, of weaving new social relations and histories, and also addresses the necessity to rethink practices beyond national borders, right? Such as in the case of Maya communities, as a way of healing the colonial wounds of Abya. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk to us for a moment about this project.
Yeah, you can put the slide of that. It's really interesting that I made with Galeria Muy, and it was really interesting because this is not an exhibition. An exhibition respond at the necessity of need a gallery to tell our story. That's what this is a project who built about the who gets around about the thinking about Maya communities. It was the next of
yes. Yes, I'm getting
who built around the Maya communities about not recognizing border.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really interesting because the colonizers say, okay, you're Guatemala, you're El Salvador, but as a Maya structures, we are built all around Central America. So we start this project 2 years ago, and we started talking about the Mayan culture with artists that are tzotziles, cachiqueles, sutujiles, and they were thinking about, like, I don't know if I make art or I make instructions. So I say to them, you are making what you feel in your cultural statement. It's knowledge. So they say, okay, but for white people, we can call it art. That is perfect. So this artist just talk about the pandemic just when, and we were thinking, like, what do you pandemic feels? What what the indigenous community think about pandemic. Yes. And they saying, like, Manuel Chavajais, he say Waal, that he make this recipient that you can put stuff together, food together, water together, but the word Waal means we don't have more, like we abstinence of it. And then we have Saul Kak with this piece of art that is talking about what is food for Occidental people and what is food for us, like a plate of maize is important, but it's like this what we built in of art. PH Joel was thinking everybody wear mask, and he made this great scenario that her fathers were wearing a mask in in the jungle that with he's living, and he used it like a satire, like a joke
Yeah.
for all the world. And it was so interesting to build the idea of a pandemic with the indigenous community, but because they were saying we are in peace if our grandfathers go, because this is going to happen. And then we also have a pandemic that is bigger than that our grandparents passed, and it was colonialism that killed a lot of people, and we have a genocide that killed a lot of people. And so this project, more than the piece of work that I think is beautiful and tell a lot of history and tell knowledge of the community, it bring us together in Sutujiles, cachiqueles, itzotziles, that talking how our skin, how our political intention feels about the situation. So it was really cool to understand how the artwork structure built for us.
Yes. Thank you for this. So I'm going to turn it off, ask you the last question, and then we will move on to the Q&A. I wanted to ask you this very last question because it's about somehow what is going on now and how you're thinking about future projects and so on. And also in what you mentioned before, that it's very important to try and give life to new communities rather than just operating on what is already out there. So I wanted to focus for a moment about relationships of sort of sisterhood, resistance, feminist resistance, critical thinking. And there's this project that you recently initiated, which is La Revuelta, which is a collective network, right, to empower women in the arts by reshaping not only sort of the professional aspects, but really the knowledge, the narratives, the topics around feminism and contemporary art history and curatorship. So I wanted just to ask you if you could talk to us for 1 minute about it. And it doesn't have a website, but it has an amazing Instagram account. So I'll just share it like this.
Yeah, like the revuelta, it was really interesting because we realized as a women, like we were reading the history of art, because one guy just once asked me, like, oh, this big artist about Carlos Merida here in Guatemala. And he said, who's the biggest woman who can be like Carlos Merida? And I can't believe it that he asked me this question, and I was like, it doesn't, because the structure of violence does not permit us.
Yeah.
And then a lot of girls were writing me in Instagram, Twitter, and they say like, oh, I feel that. And so we realized, and we were reading the history of an art with patriarchal glasses. So we have to take them off and build them about the feminist thinking we represent. So we think in the name La Revuelta, that is a troublemaker or manifestation. And we think of a girl swinging in a swing, and she gives the whole circle to the swing. And then, that myth that goes back in time. So we think about it. For talk about us, we have to realize the importance of talking the history of an art with a female perspective. And we think about nothing of us without us, because we see a lot of men talking about art women, we see a lot of men talking about feminism, we see a lot of men, and they always say like, oh, this big artist is like so ahead of her time. And I just realized you saying that because you don't like it. When she is on your time, you always send them to the future. So we built this amazing project with the girls I don't even know, because I met her online for these 6 past months, and we were thinking of a project. We were thinking about the importance. So we started with all the curators in Guatemala, because we have a lot of women curators, but we don't have none of museum, national or international, a Guatemalteca director of the museum. So that was really thinking for us, and we are trying to build the history of the curatorial programs with women curators. And
We lost you for a moment, Maya. Let's see. Can you hear us, Maya?
Can you hear me?
There you go. You're back.
Okay, so we are thinking like everybody say that we are a troublemaker because we are women with the voice. So yeah, we are a troublemaker. We have a problem, and it's our problem to have a thesis like investigation curatorial process. So that is where that is what I'm involved right now with this my sisterhoods, my friends, and we are building this powerful thing.
Thank you so much, Maya. So I'm going to pick up, I think there was one, I'll just go somehow backwards. And the latest one that came up, I'm going to show you. Here we go, from Eleni Riga. Asking you, which is the best way for our professionals and our communities outside of Guatemala to amplify your voices? Do you think that we could actually create effective and affective alliances? I think it's a wonderful, wonderful question. So off you go.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, and it happens to me too, when I was thinking to amplify the voice, I don't get that the people that are fighting for this activism process, they already have one voice. They already are thinking. They already are working in it. So the word in Spanish I use for it is acuerpar. Like I don't know how to say it in English, but it's like your body is gonna embrace my body so I can bring my voice out. So that is really important to me because we don't need to white community occidental talk about me. We need to talk about ourselves. That is the greatest liberty engagement for me in art. And so if I can talk about myself without not anybody saying we are being inclusive, like that is the freedom. That is what we are doing right now. I'm talking with myself, with my voice. That is the real revolutionary, a girl who is talking about herself.
I think this is amazing. So not speaking for others. And I think from our side, I think being in this constant effort and intentionality of listening, if I can add, precisely for the reason that you said, that we don't need to talk. It's good to kind of stay quiet and listen to what is being said somehow. And then Cecilia earlier on asked, I think you addressed it somehow, but I just want to show you about the history of Guatemala, of broken heart and bones. And we mentioned it briefly, but do you see your curatorial practice as a way of healing and of resilience? And then and then she asks for you and the people involved in your project.
I think the people who are hurting others. So it was important to me to be healing in this process and reorganize my, how can I say rabia?
Like your rage.
I need to organize my rage so I can speak and I can say what I really meant to say, what I really meant to rescue. And for me, my curatorial practice is not only about being healing and the history of others been telling, but it's also about being fierce, like not violent, just being fierce, like say what I need to say with art, say what other people have need to say with her work of pieces. And I think the most important thing of my curatorial practice that I'm not come alone. That is not only my battlefield. This is a battlefield that have hundreds of years that I'm only calling in the art field.
Amazing. And then the very, very first question we got, which was at the very beginning, and I think you've talked at length about this, but maybe we can conclude on one detail of this question. It comes from this other person asking about your objectives. And I think you've talked about it, but also the challenges. And we've talked about it for a moment, but I want to ask you whether, just to wrap up somehow, if you want to mention briefly, what are the challenges after all the work you've done and all the work you're doing through these networks, as part of these networks? Maybe I would take the liberty to extend this question and ask you, what do you think is the key or biggest challenge, or the biggest challenges? It doesn't need to be one. It can be, I guess, a block of things. For sure, it's a knot of different things, but what do you see as really the challenges that you have ahead of you, that you need to face, that perhaps you haven't had the chance to directly face, or that you're working on right now through all this project that you discussed?
Well, first of all, the first big wall I have to understand, it was the art, or the consciousness of art, that everybody was telling me it doesn't exist. That I'm gonna build my own document, my own history around it. So that was the first. And then I realized, because a lot of my first work was try to gain a space in the art field, and then I say I don't need to prove to anybody nothing. I don't need to prove myself that I'm an art creator, because I deserve it. For a historical history, as a woman, I deserve this place, and I'm just going to do whatever I feel of, because sometimes I feel that for men, it very little requires of them. And if you're a woman in the front field, you're okay. So what you're thinking about that? Like, maybe sometimes I feel like people are asking you like, oh, so you're a feminist. So what's the name of all the women in the world? So I think that people are asking me that kind of stuff. So I decided I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I deserve this place because it's my historically territory. And so I acknowledge that. And for the future, I think I came a long way. Like, only for being here and talking to you is a long way. But I would like to see a woman in front of museums, in galleries, an indigenous woman, indigenous curator, curating in museums in Guatemala. And for most important thing for me, as I always say this in every space that I'm work, that the revolution in art is gonna be feminist, it's gonna be indigenous, it's gonna be diverse, LGBT consciousness, community consciousness, or at least, or it's not going to be like the revolution is gonna be this way.
Thanks, Maya. We're receiving a lot of comments that are all sort of greeting you and applauding your approach and the strength, and I think it requires a lot of it. So thank you so very much for all of this and for sharing and taking the time to talk to us. I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart, really. So all the things that we've discussed, as usual, there are links on the page of the talk, which I'm going to share right now again. For people who want to read more articles about the various projects you've discussed, there is a video about La Bienal and Resistencia that people can watch there. So there are a tiny bit of resources for those who might want to explore further or get to know further your work. So we're wrapping up. Again, thank you so very much. And for everybody who's watching, I just want to say thank you again for staying with us tonight. And we will be back on Tuesday, November 3rd, again at 6:30 p.m. Berlin time. We will announce the speaker in the coming days. So again, if you want to stay up to date on the All SHIFT COMM series, the link that you see here is where you can subscribe to the newsletter. And I also encourage everybody who would like to get in touch with Maya or has feedback, questions, comments, anything really, to just send us an email. This is the email address and it's open for everybody. I actually get very few emails and I would love to see more. So please feel free to do that. So again, Maya, thanks so much and be well and safe.
Bye.
Bye.